Ignorant Bliss, quick hit. Yo, hold fast. This is a spoiler review. Mass spoilers. Be warned. Hey, everybody. What I'm reviewing this time on this quick hit is Mr. Miracle #1, 2007 series from DC Comics. Is done by the writer Tom King, artist Mitch Gerards. He does pencil, inks, and colors. Clayton Cowles is the letterer. Nick Darrington does the main cover. Mitch Gerard does the variant cover. Molly Mahan is the associate editor, and Jamie S. Rich is the main editor. Mr. Miracle is a character created by Jack Kirby for the Fourth World line of books that was the big deal when Jack Kirby left Marvel in the 70s to come to DC and create his own thing without his frequent and famous collaborator Stan Lee. I will tell you now, for those, I might be a little biased. I am publicly known within some comic circles to really love Jack Kirby's Fourth World. I was first introduced to them back in the Superpowers when Darkseid and Caliber back in the side was up in that joint, fighting Super Friends. Had ill little toys and didn't pay much mind to it. Then, in Superman the animated series, part of the DC animated continuity in the 90s by Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, and Alan Burnett and many others. They used the Fourth World very well with some great voice acting, especially Michael Ironside as Darkseid. I loved how that shit matched. He's been used in other things, and then been reading the comics and such and such. Been on some old podcasts like Comic Geek Speak and stuff, talking about the Fourth World and with especially Morrison's take on some of these characters in Seven Soldiers and then Final Crisis. Also, I know Tom King. He's a really good guy. When he told me he was going to write this book, and his homies over at the podcast No Apologies, they brought him over and they was like, yo, you gotta talk to Julian, he be going off on these tangents. And I gave him I went on my rant on how I see these characters that Jack Kirby created and how they fit into like culture and society and the themes in it. And he shouted me out on the Pace article about promoting this comic. So I just wanted to get that out of the way for anybody comment with some slide shade comment, trying to read me some receipts or something. But we're gonna get into this comic talk. Essentially, the plot of this book deals with Mr. Miracle. His name is Scott Free. He's a new god. He is married to Big Barda, who was a member of Granny Goodness's, a member of Darkseid's apocalyptic elite, the Female Furies. They fell in love, they escaped, and they live on Earth. And in this current book, they live in LA. He became a escape artist taught by a previous man by the name of Mr. Miracle. He died way back in the first issue, back in the 70s. Ever since then, he's been helping the heroes out, member of a Justice League team or two. He's kind of lighthearted. But this book kind of shows him dealing with heavy stuff. It opens very much with Scott attempting to do the greatest escape. So he slits his wrists to attempt suicide, in which he gets taken to the hospital, saved. Barda is all messed up in the game. When he gets out of the hospital, he comes home. He has to deal with paparazzi. Orion, another new god. For those who have no idea what any of this stuff is. Maybe I'll get into some of this other stuff, backstory, later in another episode. But he comes in through a boom tube. He has an interaction with Scott in which he punches him a bunch of time, and Barda tells him, yo, you need to get up out of here. He bounces. He goes on a TV show and a late night show and tries to tell the public, it's nothing, I'm not going through nothing. I'm just trying to be a better escape artist. He meets with his dad, High Father of the New Gods, their leader. He very much is kind of Abrahamic God and Moses in one character. And basically what happens is that Scott finds out that his father dies by the hands of Darkseid, and that he and his wife must go back to New Genesis to help with the war. There's a lot more going on here in terms of subtext and themes. But for a second, I want to talk about Mitch's art. I think from what I hear, he works digitally. But it's not something you can tell because it has a very analog look. He uses a lot of textured brushes and zipper tone to give you a feel of some of the way the old comics looked. But also it has a feel of texture that to me reminds me of illustration work in the 70s, especially within comic magazines and at times album covers. There's a grittiness to it, especially for probably the first, let me say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the first 10 or so pages. There's a grittiness to it. It's also done on a 9-panel grid. It was made famous in the comic series, then considered graphic novel Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. It allows a certain type of pacing that I feel, I don't want to call cinematic because it doesn't feel cinematic. It feels more peak TV-ish. And what I mean by peak TV-ish, I would say when you watch something like Mad Men or Breaking Bad or so. Mitch's use of color is a lot of blues, and at times there's a lot of more darker colors, like darker blues and sometimes greens that allow the yellows and reds to pop more on the eye to draw attention. He also allows light to do a lot, I feel. So there's a room in which there's a scene when Orion visits in which Scott is watching TV with Barda asleep on his lap, and it's set in basically a dark room in which the light is mostly coming from the television, and it has that look of when people are in a dark room, that deepest blue hue. But you can notice that the skin tones is blue, whereas you can still see certain pops of color for clothing. So Scott's hoodie is seen as red, and then when Orion appears while his face, the skin tone is still blue. All the colors of his outfit pop out more, and it moves the eye throughout the whole page. Another thing done is that there's these tactile pieces of elements like film type, like scratches on film and splatters, and like pieces of tape added to the pages. It's really interesting work, and there's moments in which there's certain like television type distortions to panels that I think is using, along with the writing by Tom, to show you that there is something wrong with Scott and with the story. There is a ongoing theme about God, knowing what God is, and within the new God's fourth world idea is very much a competing thing, where there is the New Genesis and High Father and Dark Side. It's not something you should look at like, let's say, Zeus and Hades. It's more or less, or even God and the devil. It's more like evil God versus good God, to use simple terms of good and evil, like dark and light. So there are many panels where you just see a panel that just says in black with white text, it just says Dark Side is, and it's plays at very interesting moments of Scott going through like the realest shit. Like there's like a level of depression you can feel within the story. Scott Free, even though he's from New Genesis, he grew up on Apocalypse, so you can almost see there's a certain level of post-traumatic stress disorder, also dealing with like his place in the world. He has his life where he's like kind of a regular guy, but in a sense, like he's a guy that walks among men. He chooses mortals. He doesn't choose to live on New Genesis. He chooses to live with human beings and the crazy superheroes that run around with human beings. He lives in LA, so he deals with like being famous, but he's a god and he's famous, and he has these same problems, like tripping about like his old friend Oberon dies from like cancer. You can see all these things in here, how all this is like encroaching on him. My personal, right now, as early as issue 1 out of 12, I'm thinking that technically Scott Free dies in this issue, and everything we see after that is him in the escape process. Like he's in the anti-life equation, which is another big complex idea of something that Darkseid uses. If he gets his hand on the anti-life equation, he will basically rewrite creation into which he is the focus. That's his goal. That's what he wants to do. There's also nice book ending scenes of. There's the scene in which Orion visits him after he kills himself and punches the shit out of him, in which Barter kind of plays Orion out about like kind of how he grew up on New Genesis instead of Apocalypse. But later on, he's trying to say that he's not right, and then like his own wife steals him across the jaw and like tells him to get the fuck back up, because they gotta be about this business. But he's not right, and I don't think he knows how to be right at this moment in time. But he still has obligations. He's seeing his old friend Oberon. He's having conversations with him, and he's like, he doesn't know how to deal with the world right now. Another clue is the scene in which he's on a late night show is being hosted by a character named Glorious Godfrey. Um, it's a show that says Late Night with Godfrey. Godfrey in New Gods, he's a character that is meant to manipulate and gain people into following. He's basically an evil priest or preacher, and usually he's used in these stories to show certain things in the world. So sometimes he might be a TV pundit or a news anchor or someone like that. And it seems like in this one he's Seth Meyers. He looks like Seth Meyers, no lie. I thought that was an interesting joke, even though I like Seth Meyers. It's interesting to put him in a type of place versus the usual talking head on a fake news channel. I think Tom King did a really good job of also balancing the beginning and the end with narration boxes that feels like the old Jack Kirby, Mr. Miracle stuff. Like, how amazing is this? Can he get through this type of writing? While the rest is very, very kind of real life type of humanizing dialogue and pacing for characters that are very much supposed to be deities. I'm very interested to see what happens next in the corresponding next 11 issues. I told Tom that I might be his biggest critic out of everybody else, just because of the way I see these characters and I think how they fit within the DC universe. And it's also a pretty dope way to so far to honor the 100th year anniversary of Jack Kirby being born. So if anybody wants to holler at me, reach out me to online, at Julian Lytle, and I'll talk to you all day about this comic or New Guys in general. Hope this little review made sense. Yeah, peace. So, ignorantbliss.com, ignorant-bliss.com is where you can check out my main podcast. This is on iTunes. That's on iTunes. Just search Ignorant Bliss, or I should basically just say Apple Podcast now. I like to be fancy. Twitter is IGBL Podcast. Ignorant Bliss Podcast. On Facebook, Ignorant Bliss Podcast at gmail.com. If you want to contact me, talk to the show, you can comment on this as well. I'm at Julian Lytle, LYTLE, on all social media. So, hope you enjoyed. Deuce.